becoming a clinical psychologist is that whatever we've discussed today, being able to hold that space, analyze the complex issue, it's very common to see trainees who are getting burnt out.
If you are unsure whether this is a career that it's a good fit for you, you can ask yourself first.
Sitting at the other side of the chair in the therapy room really give you some level of insight of whether or not this is for you.
When you decide to study and take on this role, it is Welcome to Be Kind to Your Mind, a podcast brought to you by People Psychological Solutions. Thinking about a career in clinical psychology. In Malaysia, the journey is no walk in the park. You'll need a master's degree, 1,500 hours of practicum, and a solid mix of book smarts, people skills, and a passion for the field. Is this the right path for you? Today, we dive into what it really takes to thrive in this career. Joining us today in this episode are two psychologists from People, Kher Yin as well as Serene. To help us get started with our episode today, perhaps a quick introduction about yourself.
Okay. All right. I will go first. My name is Kher Yin and I'm a clinical psychologist. So what I do is I've been practicing in private sector for the past few years, and beyond my clinical one-on-one work, in the past I've also been involved in community mental health program and educational mental health program.
My name is Serene. Nice to meet you again, and thank you, Alvin, for having me here today. I'm also a clinical psychologist here. Been practicing in the private sector for the past few years, while at the same time, I'm also a clinical supervisor to help trainees who are actually doing their clinical psychology program to support them to obtain the certificate and qualifications.
So Kher Yin and Serene, the reason why we have more guests on the episode today is to provide a more, I suppose, balanced or comprehensive view based on your personal experience on what it means or how is it like in the journey of being a clinical psychologist. Because if it's just me and some other person, perhaps, it's not as wide and varied as compared to having the both of you here today. So the whole reason for the episode today is to cater to those in the audience who are thinking of pursuing this line of work to be a clinical psychologist. And I'm going to start with the facts here. Over in Malaysia, in order for someone to become a clinical psychologist, they need to have a master's in clinical psychology, which is a 2 years full-time program in Malaysia, which covers both research and practical components. And to enroll in this program, a student will need to have a prerequisite of a psychology degree. So this is required especially when they go into the master's program having to acquire more advanced skills and knowledge with regards to mental health. As part of the 2 years master's degree, they have to complete 1,500 hours of supervised practicum hours. And then from there to register with the Ministry of Health in order for them to be considered registered and qualified to provide the services. So that's the whole requirements part of things. But I think based on some of the questions that I've received on LinkedIn from potential applicants to a clinical psychology program, or just curious students who are thinking to become a clinical psychologist, they might be wondering if they possessed the right qualities, characteristics, personality of what it takes to become a clinical psychologist. So our discussion today is really more from our personal experience and our observations from being part of the field and our whole journey from being a student all the way to being a practicing psychologist and how it was like. And perhaps from this discussion and sharing that can provide potential applicants or potential future psychologists a better idea of what to expect, not so much from the requirements part of things, but more so from the individual personality side of things. So we are going to start with a question with regards to your own personal journey. What inspired you to become a clinical psychologist?
So for me, funnily enough, my journey with clinical psychology actually started with music. Right. So in my childhood, I was one of those kids who attended piano lesson. So even though I was not particularly good at it, but of course I spent some hours practicing, right? And by the time I was finishing my high school, the idea of music therapy really caught my interest. So I tried to do some research and I got to know that, oh, I think I do need a psychology degree, like to start this potential career. So that's what got me into the degree. And during my undergrad, I found myself more drawn towards subject related to clinical psychology. But at that time, I wasn't entirely sure about whether or not this path is right for me. So I tried to keep my option open. And after graduation, I stumbled upon an opportunity to work in the UNHCR. It is a UN agency who work with refugee and asylum seeker in Malaysia. So I find that experience like really moving and sometimes even heartbreaking as I listened to their first-hand stories about, how they were experiencing persecution in their home country, how they fled to, like the other country. And sometimes I noticed that many of them struggle to articulate their experience because of the emotional baggage that they carry. So I think it was those moments that I knew that, from those moments, I wanted to do something more to support them emotionally. But I also realized that I have some limitations and I don't have the right skills and the knowledge to do that. So that was quite a turning point for me that I decided to pursue a master in clinical psychology.
Whereas for me, I'll keep it simple. For me, it's just as simple as people. Because if I were to look back, I don't think there's any particular moment or things that makes me feel inspired to pursue clinical psychology, but just as simple as just very curious about people, like what they think, what they feel, why they do certain things. And for me, it's just I made the decisions to just pursue this career, and then I just get into it.
So what the both of you have shared so far, if I were to summarize some themes of what I'm noticing, it will be in terms of perhaps a personal tendency to lean more towards an interest in people. And I think that is going to be important because when a person is a clinical psychologist, especially in practice, we'd have to deal with people all the time. And that is the nature of our work. So having an interest in people is going to be helpful as a form of motivation and continued engagement, fulfillment, and meaning in the role. At the same time, I think Kher Yin also mentioned about having an interest on how to apply psychology. You started off with your interest in music and how can this be applied to other people. And clinical psychology is what we consider to be within the subfield of applied psychology. We have research and then we have what is applied from the research. And clinical psychology is one of them, where we take the best practices of what we know can improve people's quality of life and mental health, and to be able to apply that in practice with our work with clients. But you also mentioned one other key theme that I'm also noticing among psychologists and aspiring psychologists. It is the key theme of suffering, whether their own individual suffering or observing the suffering of others and wanting to help with that. Because being a psychologist, as with a counselor or a psychiatrist and so on, these are considered to be helping professions where we are helping others to improve something. And this is going to be very common for individuals who are thinking about pursuing a master's in clinical psychology. Personally, for myself also, aside from it being intellectually stimulating, the things that we learn are quite interesting. It also stems from the desire of wanting to help others. Now, but I think based on the things that we have mentioned so far, those are the things that got us started into wanting to apply and going through with the whole process. But if you were to bring yourself back in time, going back to that, pre-U student life or maybe university student life, and going to the point where you had decided to apply into clinical psychology, what is that one advice that you would give yourself, knowing what you know now, before starting on this whole journey?
For me, is that like instead of advice, I probably would say that I would like to give myself some words of encouragement. Because as I go through the journey and I look back right now, is that like because back then I was very eager to really, really wanting to faster to learn and then be able to just get the hang of like all of the skills that I need to become a good clinical psychologist. So like looking back, I probably want to give myself some words of encouragement. Mainly is to trust the process more, because if I were to just trusting in the process, that I would be continuously to learn, improve and grow instead of just rushing into things. I find that actually is the best. Reason being is that like when I am able to just trust in the process, I can then stay connected, stay present with my client. A lot of time like that is actually usually one of the most meaningful and impactful work in my current work right now.
I think to add on to what you're saying, there is quite a great deal of items, knowledge and skills to consume and develop over a short period of time. In different parts of the world, the education that's required to be a clinical psychologist could differ. In the US and the UK, for example, it is at the PhD level. So that's an additional 3 years. And how programs are designed in different parts of the world, such as in Malaysia, is that you're looking at a 5-year program and trying to compress that into a 2-year full-time program. So in Malaysia, especially the hours that you're doing in practicum and to meet a master's requirement is actually quite high in comparison to if you're looking at a 5-year program where you could actually space out the learning a little bit more. So there's a lot of things to cover, and I think having supervised trainees for some time now is going to be quite common to meet trainees who are overwhelmed or burdened with the amount of tasks that they need to do, which from one hand we understand that is required in order for us to graduate and for society to know that it's safe for you to practice. But on the other, undoubtedly is a lot of things. So that might feel like someone isn't able to perhaps be more present, it's as if like they are on a bullet train all the time throughout their education. So I think learning to pace ourselves more so than sprinting, but rather it being a marathon is going to be helpful in terms of ensuring longevity in our career, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely.
What about you, Kher Yin? What do you think might be an advice that you will tell your younger self?
For me, if I can go back in time a little more, right, I would tell myself to be more proactive in developing my language skills, be it, like in expressing myself and in understanding others. Right, so I would say that, like probably read more, watch more show, even join a debate club, Well, I know that, language is not the most important way to, connect with others, but I think that choosing the right words when reflecting someone's inner experiences can really make a huge difference. For me, it is that. Right. I think that I also regret not picking up BM along the way because, I can hold a casual conversation in a BM, but there's definitely not proficient enough to conduct a therapy session. And I think I miss out on an opportunity to work with clients who only speak Malay. Right. And I would say that being fluent in Malay is actually very important if you want to work in the government sector or, in the community.
Yes. So I can resonate very much with that. I think the both of you know this. I am a banana, so only speak English, but I'm also able to speak Malay quite fluently, because you're right in which having a good proficiency in languages is going to be really important in our field of work. Having to interact with a client in great detail requires a good proficiency of the language. So if you are just moderately proficient in English, let's say, having to do sessions in English is going to be quite challenging. We want to pick the right words in order to, exactly communicate what we need, as well as to articulate our understanding of what the client is saying, in order to really develop that relationship and to ensure effective therapy actually happens. So language is definitely something that can be an emphasis when it comes to being a good psychologist.
Yep, definitely.
But I think, we have mentioned quite a few things with regards to requirements or qualities of being a good psychologist, just from a very basic introduction of what got us going. Language, learning to pace ourselves, acknowledging suffering. All these things are really important. And I think it's going to be quite difficult to select a few key qualities, but I'm going to attempt to ask this question here. What do you think, in your experience, would be qualities that separate between a good psychologist and perhaps a great one or a very competent one? What are the important qualities you think?
For me, I think that being a good psychologist is someone who has a solid clinical knowledge and also able to apply evidence-based techniques effectively. So to me, that would be qualified as a good psychologist. Whereas a great psychologist, they have the ability to be deeply attuned and also stay present with their clients. So they are able to just reflect on themselves and also be flexible, adaptable. So if I were to summarize it in like simple terms, I think great psychologists are not just able to apply tools, but they are also able to empower the clients to actually use the tools for themselves, and they are able to facilitate the sense of safety, connections, that hope and confidence in the client to go on with their life and to overcome, just go about with their life challenges. That would be what I think that really differentiate a great psychologist from a good one.
And before you move on to Kher Yin, I like to, hang on to that sharing for a little bit, because to be a clinical psychologist, we are operating based on the scientist practitioner model, which means that we are adopting outcomes of scientific research and be able to actually practice that with our clients. There is a kind of responsibility of being evidence-based and informed by the research in what we are doing. It is only right that we are providing a service that is validated, that has shown good promise in terms of how it can assist the clients. So from the scientific point of view, that is a responsibility that every clinical psychologist will need to carry. And for that to actually happen, it requires students in clinical psychology or practitioners to have a scientific mind. And generally, from my observations, students, trainees, even psychologists that have been part of people are quite academically inclined, right? So they can do well in terms of, answering the science questions, I suppose, to have a good grasp of the academics. Because if we want to be informed by the evidence all the time, it will mean that we have to look through the research articles to be able to understand research in order for us to begin practicing that with clients. That's the whole, I think, applying the tools and techniques and whatnot that you mentioned earlier. But the challenge here of being a scientist practitioner is that ultimately you are also a practitioner, which means that you are dealing with the person on the other side of the couch. And that requires a great amount of people skills. We need to demonstrate understanding. We need to empower. We need to model. We need to listen effectively. And all these are people skills that, if we look at the binary of being book smart and, people smart, sometimes it can be seen as two separate skills altogether. But the challenge of being a clinical psychologist is that in order to be a great one, we need to both be a scientist and also an excellent practitioner, which means that we are good with people.
We need to combine the two of that.
Yeah, and I think that's a challenge, right? Most of us we are more inclined to one thing or the other. We can have therapists who are very empathetic, but maybe not as academically inclined, and vice versa. And how do we actually strike that balance? Because both likely are going to be highly needed skills in order to provide the best benefits to our clients.
True. Right.
What about you, Kher Yin? What do you think would be qualities that makes a great psychologist?
For me, I think that beyond the clinical competency, it is also important for, I imagine a great psychologist is someone who can be deeply self-aware, meaning that they don't just understand their clients, but they also understand themselves. They are aware of their inner experiences, like their thoughts, their feelings, their reaction, their even potential bias, that might arise during their clinical work, so that they don't let all this interfere with their work, so that, like they can be, just now Serene mentioned, to be, emotionally attuned to the client, attuned to not just what is being said, but also what is left unspoken. And I think that a great psychologist is someone who is able to pick up, subtle changes in tones, in expression, in body language, or maybe as well as recurring themes or patterns that the client themselves might not realize. Right. So I think that really just listening beyond words is something that's important for being a psychologist. Right. And I think that other than that, I also personally feel that I imagine someone who is a great psychologist is someone who can hold complexities and contradictions in the sessions, meaning that, we have all been there, that, we are sometimes torn between two things. Like in our life, sometimes, we might want freedom, excitement, but at the same time, we also want stability. Or we might really want to take a leap of faith to, make some changes, but we are like really afraid of, potentially failing. So I think that a great psychologist makes space for that, to maybe not rush you to arrive at a certain conclusion, but also allow you to sit with the discomfort, to like really explore the underlying feelings, the desire, the fear, to find out, like what truly matters to you, and to work through your struggle at your own pace. Right? I think that, in today's world that, it is very fast paced and all of that. So having space to like really slow down and make sense of your own experiences, arrive at your own conclusion at how you want to live a meaningful life, that is, something that is important, and I strive to be someone like that.
So Kher Yin, you mentioned quite a lot of things. And if you were to combine everything together, it does sound like a very difficult task to accomplish. Firstly, we need to be informed of the science. We need to have very good people skills in terms of our listening, relationship building, and just general interest towards people. And then, based on what you're saying, what can be helpful is that we could have an analytical mind as well, to be able to understand the complexities of human life. We might want one thing, but actually want the other, and to be able to sort of have an accepting attitude that all of these things can exist at once, and what's the best way forward with our clients. But one other thing that you've touched on as well, and I think, it's a very difficult recipe to fulfill to be a clinician here, or an excellent clinician. Science, people skills, analytical skills, and lastly, the skill to be self-aware. And this is incredibly important because we do not want our personal agenda or our personal unfinished businesses to get in the way of our work with our clients. And in psychology or in mental health, we call that countertransference. Sometimes some things that the person says or does affects us, and rightfully so. But if we have quite a great deal of personal things to address, and we are not aware of that, that burden might be placed on the client instead. So instead of actually promoting wellness and promoting good, we might potentially inflict harm. And this ethics is something that we consider in our work with clients. There might be certain parts of the population of clientele that if a therapist is self-aware, they might not be ready to meet those populations simply because it might result in certain unresolved trauma, personal issues that might creep up in the work with clients, and that might interfere in being fully authentic and present with them. Not to mention also, if we aren't self-aware, there can be the risk of us overexerting ourselves, As I've mentioned, as was discussed earlier in the session about noticing suffering, I think a lot of psychologists go into the field thinking that they want to help others. And that's a good thing. I think we want to help others and we found an outlet to actually do so, which is in mental health. But at the same time, from that enthusiasm and wanting and the keenness of wanting to help others, we might overexert ourselves that we might be burnt out over time. Or that in the keenness of wanting to help others, we might help our clients in an inappropriate way. For example, clients developing dependency on a therapist rather than for them to be more skillful in managing themselves. And the therapist might unknowingly develop issues with dependency because of their enthusiasm of wanting to help others. But in actual fact, actually makes matters worse in that way. So our work with our clients can become quite complex because there's so many things that's going on at the same time. Personal factors on the part of the therapist, personal factors on the part of the client, and some of the requirements to function effectively in terms of the book smarts, people smarts, and so on. But if we were to look at personal strengths, those qualities likely for all of them to exist at the same time, at a very high level, is going to be very challenging. So I think over time also, I have developed a bit more self-compassion over some of the, I think, things that, or qualities that are lacking within myself to be a good psychologist. We can also look at our personal strengths. My strengths, I think, are quite different than the both of you. But what are your personal strengths that allows you to function as a psychologist at a perhaps competent or a good level of functioning?
Rather than strength, I would say that it is more like a belief that has been keeping me going. I do personally believe that everyone deserves to have a space to be heard, and doesn't matter who you are, what your background is, what do you struggle with, that everyone deserves to feel understood, to be heard, and to allow space to work through their inner struggle. I think that is what I believe in as a therapist that kept me going.
So the sort of role that you play as a psychologist and the kind of environment that you create for your clients, that's what you think helps you engage with your clients and to help them.
Yep. I think that, I mean, like, not gonna lie that, like sometimes when it get like really challenging, the thought of like really just giving up came to mind. But oftentimes that, it is really this belief that has been keeping me going so far.
Sure. What about you, Serene?
For me is that I think it really tapped on just now, like the part that you mentioned, how we as a psychologist, we are not, we are like the supporter, the one who wants to help, but we do not take their issue with us. So the client then become dependent on us as though like we are the savior. I think like with this, it does actually tap on like my belief and value for being a psychologist is that for me, perhaps it's about, for me, I always remind myself is humility. Humility in the sense of like, I actually like tend to do this since I was a trainee, is that like, I believe that like everyone is their own active agent in their own life. And I am not the expert in their life, but I want them to be empowered to be able to lead their own life, because I might not even be the expert in my own life as well. I'm only someone like who has the knowledge regarding psychology, regarding the struggles that they are having. I'm here to actually facilitate their insight, their understanding, and also that change in their behavior. So like I used to have this habit of just before I go in the session to see the client, I will visualize myself as though like I'm entering a new planet. Is I'm going into a new planet where I don't know about like the people living here. So I'll just go in and then like, okay, to have that posture that, I'm going to actually really explore first and to understand how is it like to live in this planet. Like how does it feel like actually what they think, what are their beliefs, what are the norms, and also why they do certain things in this way. So like to me, it's about like, it takes someone to be actually, for me, I think that it's very important for us to be humble enough to go in to actually want to really learn about the clients, about them. So that like I want to come in like, okay, teach me about you. So I want to really know and also understand how is it like to be you? What have you experienced? And also like to you, what all this actually means to you? What is it that you're struggling with? And so I can actually join in their journey and to see what we can actually do things together to make it different for them.
Sure. So I think there is a fair bit of similarity between what the both of you are sharing in terms of creating the right kind of environment for the clients to be able to address their personal concern. And I think this would require a fair bit of relationship skills, people skills, which is understandable in our line of work. And really important as well. But I think if we think about the applicants in clinical psychology, you can have people who are very in tune with themselves or are very curious about their clients. Maybe like Serene is thinking, I'm going to enter this new planet with this person together. There's going to be people who may tend to fall more on the book smart rather than more people skills domain, right? So they might be more academically inclined. People skills maybe is an area of development for them. And I think a bit of silver lining here, if I were to share about what I think will be a quality that gives me an edge as a psychologist, is that there are going to be approaches and what we know of mental health and the science of it is a kind of subject matter expertise. And a clinical psychologist, especially those who are actively engaged in specific fields of research, are able to become subject matter experts within a field. And this is a space that is available for people who intend to be clinical psychologists and yet are more inclined into the research part of things. And in terms of practice, there is value for the kind of expert knowledge to be shared as well, because as much as perhaps both of you are more developed or competent in people skills, some clients might also appreciate that there is someone who is experienced or able to provide them with the right kind of knowledge with regards to very specific problems that they might be having, with OCD, depression and so on, what needs to be done, what does the science say? And this can be a value that can be utilized for those who, perhaps are more academically inclined.
Yeah, I agree. I think that you don't necessarily have to, change your personality to fit into the role as a therapist that, probably not every client are ready to come in to explore their feelings. Some might prefer a therapist who can be a bit more directive, who can lead them and guide them into, the goal that they want to achieve. Mm-hmm. So I think that, that is okay too.
Yeah, and there are different approaches that tends to weigh differently in terms of how the relationship between therapist and client is like. Some maybe tend to be more of a teacher-student or expert listener kind of a relationship, and others are more of a 50-50 that client and therapist, not much difference. And this also depends on, I suppose, the psychologist's strengths, the psychologist's own characteristics of personality. Now, one thing's for sure though, and this is something that's going to be a concern that potential students might worry about, and that is with regards to dealing with a lot of emotional concerns that are relayed on the part of the therapist. A variety of different kinds of suffering, whether it's psychological suffering or, suffering in the form of relationships, childhood, and so on. And all these can be quite heavy to consume on the part of the therapist. And students might be thinking, I'm not sure if I am emotionally capable enough to do this. So how do you handle the emotional demands of this job without burning out?
I think for me, I don't think there is a specific coping strategy for me, but essentially it is about setting boundaries. So that means that leaving my professional identity at work. So outside of work, I don't expect myself to be a therapist. I don't expect myself to always listen well, always be very emotionally attuned to others, always be there to others, right? So I remind myself that I'm a human first, right? And I can be myself, and I'm a human first before I'm a therapist, right? And I think that setting boundaries also means that recognizing our scope as a therapist, right? And what I mean by that is that sometimes we do come across some, like you said, some cases that are heavier, like maybe their suffering can be contributed by so many other things that is really beyond our control. So in situations like this, that we might feel helpless, we might feel like we really can relate to the other person's struggle, but it's important to remind myself there's only so much that we can do, as a psychologist, as a therapist, right? And it is important to also have faith to the client. The fact that they are courageous enough to step into the therapy room, to be vulnerable, so that says a lot about them.
So you brought up a few important items that I too practice and are really important, in which our identity. It is going to be healthier if we have a more balanced identity, where we are not just a therapist, we are also other things. And so, as the saying goes, you don't put all your eggs in one basket. And if that basket somehow drops, and then everything breaks. So if our whole identity is solely focused on the role of a therapist, something doesn't go right, it's quite likely that we will break down as well. And managing expectations is really going to be important, because if we have the expectation that every client that we see, we are going to effectively help them, again, it's going to be very unrealistic. Clients come in with a variety of motivation for change, a variety of different resources and stresses that they're going through. We likely can benefit from managing expectations of to what extent we can actually assist the client, because the client is also an active participant in this process.
Yeah.
What about you, Serene?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Kher Yin say. It's really a mix of self-awareness, self-care, and boundaries. So in the sense of really know your limitations, what are the things that you can work with, or what are the things that you find it really struggling or difficult to deal with, so that you know where to actually put a stop there and make appropriate changes or referral whenever possible. So, and not just about that, it's about knowing what actually give you the energy, what saps your energy away, so that okay, whenever you need it, you can actually supply it to your own self too. So boundaries in terms of like what Kher Yin said, tapped into really your identity. Maybe one very simple way is that to always remind ourselves that we are not there to carry clients' burden with us, but we are there to actually walk alongside them to improve and grow together. Actually, a lot of the times, one of the most common struggle or emotional struggle that therapists has is helplessness. Is that being a therapist, a lot of times, like what you mentioned, that we kind of know what are the issues are, and also what are some of the ways that can be done. Helplessness actually appear when we actually know we are actually aware that what must be done to actually help with these situations, but we can't really do it because of maybe the limitations in terms of the external circumstances that the client is actually facing, or maybe it's because of they have limited power in changing what they can change now, or it could be just it can be go into maybe bigger circumstances that they are stuck in that situations. So that we as a therapist, we feel that stuck, we feel that helplessness too. So there's a lot of time then we go back, then we think, how can we do about it? So there's a lot of time that it will creep in. So I think this is a very important reminder for us as a therapist to know that, okay, helplessness is actually very normal, we feel helpless because client is also helpless in that situation. So our role here is not to take it with us and to be panicked and anxious about it or over worried, but it's really to just continue to engage and trust in the process in working through that journey.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a good point here. In the helping profession, I think having that self-compassion or acceptance that helplessness is going to be an ongoing experience for a person in a helping profession. Earlier you mentioned you had worked in UNHCR, for example. I think the caseworkers, social workers would similarly experience the same feelings of helplessness because as much as they want to perform their role, there's a lot more things that can actually help the person. But if you to think about our role in what we can help the most, we cannot achieve all that. And to allow ourselves to be okay with the feelings of helplessness is going to be key for us to sustain our practice for the long term. Now, Kher Yin and Serene, I think that was an important question to address because it is a real concern or a real disadvantage if the person is not ready yet to hold on to that kind of feelings of helplessness or the feeling like I can't help as much as I really want to. And I really think that what's going to be helpful for us is to consider potential applicants, students who are curious or motivated to go into clinical psychology, but then they are unsure, right, based on what we've discussed today, whether or not they are a good fit to be a clinical psychologist, be it in terms of the book smarts or the people skills or the analytical skills or their emotional readiness. What do you think, as a closing to our discussion today, can be one word of advice to them or some word of encouragement or something that they should consider?
I think if you are unsure whether this is a career that it's a good fit for you, perhaps there are three main areas of questions that you can ask yourself first. So first is that to ask yourself, do you have a genuine curiosity to wanting to know about people? Because I think this is still a very important part of being a psychologist, is that you have that genuine curiosity. You want to know about their internal processes, want to know about people, why they do certain things, and really want to help them. I think that part is actually very important. So then the second thing is also to ask yourself, are you comfortable with sitting in with ambiguity and also emotional complexity, like what you mentioned? Because a lot of time is that in the session that we do with client, not every sessions we have a clear resolution. So not every time we can actually reach a clear answer to everything that they ask or actually facing in the sessions. So a lot of time we do need to deal with uncertainties and also very complex emotions. So asking yourself whether you are comfortable with that is something that is quite important to think about. Then the third one would be are you open and willing to commit yourself into a lifelong process of reflecting on yourself? Because we as a psychologist, it's not just about we helping our clients, but we ourselves also, we need to have that reflections on ourselves about what is going on within us, what are our fears, what are our challenges. So we also need to ask that difficult question for ourselves first. So I think being able to do this and that you are open to doing this is a very important quality of being a psychologist.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about you, Kher Yin?
To add on to that, I think that if you're feeling unsure, that I would say that try to get exposed to any relevant field, right? For example, you can join community event, do some volunteering, and I know that to have access into the therapy session is pretty difficult because of the privacy and confidentiality that we uphold. But there are plenty of resources online that you can watch YouTube video, about therapy session. Or I would even say that, you yourself can consider, attending your personal therapy session as well. Because I think that, sitting at the other side of the chair in the therapy room, really give you some level of insight of whether or not this is for you.
So, important questions to consider is whether you are open and willing to be burdened by existential reflections, questions throughout the rest of your life. And if this is something that you are open to, then perhaps is a kind of job that you can consider. But at the same time, I think some practical advice is to gain some form of exposure on whether this job is suitable for you or not. And 2 points here as a closing. Number one is that a bit of a silver lining or a bit of a motivator for those out there thinking of becoming a clinical psychologist is that whatever we've discussed today, whether being better with people, being able to hold the space, analyze the complex issues, or simply to be good academically, all these can be skills that are developed. So we can actually increase our tolerance or abilities through the course of time. In my role as a supervisor, it's very common to see trainees who are getting burnt out, who are overwhelmed with the number of sessions that they're doing. But our ability to have more sessions in a day, for example, grows as we become more experienced in the field. So we get better just from repetition and experience and doing things. So for those of you who are back home thinking, when people are sad, they come and talk to me, I don't know what to do, I cannot manage that. Maybe it's because, there's still a lack of experience at this time and it can actually be developed.
This capacity can actually be expanded, it's not fixed.
Yeah, correct. So a bit more of a growth mindset there lah. And secondly, it's about the working experience. If there is any ambivalence, uncertainty that this is not, or maybe this is the role for you and you're not sure, I really think it's important to be more sure, because in the line of work that we do is going to be very different than a job in the office for any business functions. There is a very unique role that we are playing here in our work, and it might not be for everyone. And when you decide to study and take on this role, it is a lifelong commitment, unless you choose to fall off the radar and do something else altogether afterwards lah. Similar to, I think, professions like being a doctor, many years of commitment into the studies and training, and at the end, you are committed to a role. I think quite similar to a psychologist as well. If you're going to commit a lot of time, effort, and this whole journey is likely something that you want to be a bit more sure of, and that can come in the form of exposure into the industry, learning more about it before you take that leap of faith.
Yeah, definitely agree. But ultimately, like what you mentioned, it's a career. So it's a career meaning that just like every career, there is a role that we are playing in, and every role comes with its own responsibilities. So now we talk about this in our episode, and also there are a lot of resources out there, even including the opportunities like Kher Yin just suggested, that they can actually really get themselves to try to explore further, to discover more. The more that you know, then the better the greater clarity that you will know what to be expected from this role, then you can come to a better informed decisions for your own self. So it's like what you mentioned, this is a very major decision to make one's career. So take your time, can really take your time to just really explore whether you really want to commit into this or not. There's no rush into decisions.
Yeah.
Actually, a lot of our interns actually, the reason why they're interning here is because of that.
Yeah.
Right. And if you feel certain, if you have done enough exploration, you feel certain that this is what you want, then hopefully your journey will be worthwhile too.
And I think for a lot of us, we can agree that it is going to be a fulfilling and meaningful career. And just as long as we are accepting of certain things, such as having to reflect on ourselves all the time, certain things that comes with the job, if we are accepting of that and we are committed to this role, it's definitely going to be one that is going to be fulfilling and meaningful. So I hope that the episode today provides, perhaps some hope and insight on the part of a potential applicant, a psychology student, to make an informed decision. Thank you, Serene and Kher Yin, for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
See you in the future.
See you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Be Kind to Your Mind. We hope that this episode provided key insights for aspiring psychologists of the future. If you enjoy this content, be sure to click subscribe. Catch us again on Spotify or YouTube every 2 weeks. See you.